Thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us in this conversation. It's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Gaurav,
much.
for having me on this. Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Rajesh, let's get into knowing a little bit about Rajesh. So, why don't you tell us something about one of your childhood memories that still bring smile on your face as you think of that today?
Yeah, I think, having grown up in middle class Chennai, to me, the one which childhood memories which probably bring a smile to my face is about simple joys. So, whether it was, while walking to school in the neighborhood bakery, picking up a Pepsi Cola, which at those days used to be 50 paisa, those long tubular ones with either a cola flavor or an orange flavor inside, and you cut the top and then you suck into it. So I think that's
I
the
remember
one I
them.
can think of, which was extremely pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
Or outside our school, there used to be this small cart which used to sell these vanilla ice creams, which is like on a stick. And
Yeah.
again, in those days, it was 25 paisa per stick.
There was a wrapper around that as
There
well.
was a butter paper wrapper,
Yeah.
and that stick you share with four friends and take one bite of it. So yeah, I think simple joys of those days is what something which I look back now also very fondly.
Yeah. So beautiful. I remember because, I remember the stick that you're talking about, the ice stick with flavors. I think
Yeah,
mine was orange was my flavor. Which was your favorite?
I think vanilla, because this guy used to have a lot of more of the vanilla flavor, and that
Uh,
used to be nice, that creamy kind of vanilla.
so, Rajesh, if you look at, we say that the childhood has a very important, vital role in shaping us who we are today.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What are those few values that you have learned from your early childhood days that continue to be very, very vital, very important for you, and the way you take decisions today?
So yeah, like I said, I pretty much did my entire schooling from grade 3 to grade 12 in the same school in Chennai,
Hmm.
and I grew up in a very humble kind of this thing in terms of a typical middle class family living in a very middle class area in Chennai.
Hmm.
So some of the values that get instilled in you right from the beginning were around simplicity, were around hard work, dedication. So I think those were the fundamental values which were there,
Hmm.
and nothing to do with ostentatious or flamboyant. So like I don't remember having had a birthday party for the longest time when I was a kid. So
Hmm.
I think those values actually make you very grounded, and I think those have stood me in very good stead over the years as I progressed in my career as well. So I
I'm
would say
sure.
simplicity, grounded, hard work, those would be some values that I
Yeah.
can.
Simplicity, every time when I've spoken to you, Rajesh, I've always found you extremely grounded. As you just mentioned, I've always found you very, very simple in terms of the way you put your thoughts together as a leader of the organization that you're leading, and we'll come there as well. But what are the other values, if you can just share a few other examples, how today also they continue to serve you? So, for example, let's say being grounded, or as you mentioned, hardworking or simplicity. If you can just share a few examples, how do they continue to serve you?
Yeah, I think if I take being grounded and the humility, the simplicity, they all sort of go together. Even if you're a CEO or if you're in any level, it doesn't really matter. But I think your ability to, for example, connect with people, right, becomes very, very critical.
Hmm.
And one way to look at it is say that I am this higher order person and sitting on a pedestal, and then the connect becomes that much less with people.
Hmm.
But the fact that for me, though some of these values were instilled in me right from the beginning, really helped me, for example, connect with people at that level across the organization. So that really helps,
Hmm.
because ultimately that does two things. One, it gives you a good sense of what's going on in the organization, right? And
Hmm.
therefore your ability to keep a pulse on the organization. And the second is it also gives you an ability to connect with people, inspire them, and get them to put in their best. So
Hmm.
I think in many ways it has impact in terms of not just a personal connect, but ultimately it also has actually a business impact as well.
And Rajesh, you mentioned that these values were instilled in me. And I'm just wondering who would give this credit to, that he's the one or she's the one who actually has helped me to instill these values in me.
Right. Okay. When I say instilled, also it's a little bit of the circumstances in which you grew up as well.
Hmm.
Of course, your parents play a role in driving some of those values in you right from the beginning. That definitely is a factor. But it's also in the environment in which you grew up. Like I said, I
Yeah,
mean, I studied in the same school. It was not a very big school, and it's a very close-knit, small
yeah,
school. Grew up in the same neighborhood throughout my childhood. So I think just the surroundings, the environment, and all of these
absolutely. Yeah.
play a role in instilling that.
And Rajesh, you hail from Coimbatore, right? And then you moved on and did your engineering from BITS Pilani. Now, how was that transition from coming from Coimbatore and then getting admission at BITS Pilani? And the second question is, who did you meet during that transition that's really important to you?
Yeah. So I think, well, I was born in Coimbatore and then I lived there a couple of years. And then, of course, the rest of the schooling I did from Chennai. But yeah, grew up in a very familiar, similar environment for the longest time. And moving on to BITS Pilani, of course, was a very, very big step
Hmm.
because, I mean, it's in the north of India, in Rajasthan. I haven't been to that part of the world. So, I mean, it was like traveling to a completely different country. So, the language is different, the culture is different. And a place like BITS Pilani is also like a melting pot for people from across the country who come there to study. So you have people from pretty much all parts of the world, and again, some of those people I have never met in my life while I studied in school as well. So in a way, it opens up things at multiple levels. So one is getting to understand a different culture, getting to understand a different kind of environment, how to adapt yourself to that, getting to meet people with very different perspectives, different languages, different
Hmm.
food habits. So I think at multiple levels, it was completely different, and the whole, of course, process of adjustment took a while. But I think it starts teaching you something, and I'm glad I did it right at that stage because it then helped me over the years. One of the things that I feel good about is getting out of comfort zone, being able to quickly adapt myself to different environments, etc.
Yeah. And I remember last time when we were talking, you mentioned that during that engineering phase of 4 years, there was one realization that you had that I'm not meant to be an engineer.
Yeah,
I personally feel that when you have these kind of epiphanies or when you have these kind of realization, it actually changes the trajectory of your life. So how did this realization change the direction of your life, if
yeah.
it did?
Well, it's true that while I was doing my engineering, and actually, by the way, I did a 5-year engineering program, so I have a double degree in engineering.
Okay.
I'm a MSc in physics and a electronics as well. Um, Actually, engineering happened by accident. I was in those days we didn't have Google and various other things to figure out what are the opportunities, etc.
Hmm.
So the best thing you could do was go to a neighbor who's got into college and then ask him, oh, what could I do, right? And that time I was not very sure of what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And then he told me about bits, and he was going to bits, and one thing led to the other, and then I applied. I got through. So then I decided to go on there. And once I went there, I figured that as I went through my years in college,
Hmm.
that yeah, of course, you learn, like I said, you learn a lot of things which open up your perspective and help me become what I am today. But one of the things I found out was that I wasn't particularly good at it or very interested in engineering, and I
Hmm.
realized to me my strengths were not in that area, and it was more around I could connect well with people. I did well in subjects which were a little bit more generalist in nature, and so on. So that's when I realized, and as we went towards the final year of our campus, almost all of my friends applied to foreign universities to go and do their MS or
Hmm.
a PhD or whatever. And I figured that to me, definitely that's not something that I enjoy doing.
Hmm.
And then I decided to apply for my MBA, and that's how I got into XLRI Jamshedpur.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think how has it impacted you in your life? I would say in two ways. One, it opened up that window for me of uh, marketing and general management, and which has got me to where I am today. And
Hmm.
also interestingly, as it happened, I met my wife now, who was also my classmate in XLRI. So we were there at the same time, and then we subsequently got married, and here
So
it is.
XLRI has definitely played a very vital role in your life.
Yeah, you can say that absolutely.
Yeah. It has not only given you a career of your choice, and a life partner that you can cherish for the
Absolutely.
lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Nirupama so well. I mean, she's such
Right.
a wonderful lady. I know of. She's a very dear friend, and I personally learned a lot from her.
Oh
She's
yeah.
a
I
good
have also
combination.
learned. Yeah, and I'm blessed to have her in my life.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Rajesh, you don't have any choice.
True. 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 I keep getting lessons every day. Yeah.
So, Rajesh, I would definitely would want to double click on your journey into XLRI. But before that, let me take a step back and let me ask you this question. Today I come across so many youngsters, and they often are looking forward to a perfect job. They step out of their college and they say that we are looking for a perfect job. They say no to this job. They say no to the second job. To they might say no to another third offering as well. So what's your idea of what do you mean by perfect job? How do you define a perfect job, perfect role? What's your take on this?
Yeah. See, the honest answer to that is I don't know if there is a perfect job, right?
Hmm.
And again, I would look at it in two perspectives. So one is, and when I say two perspectives, I mean is when we were all growing up in our career, I think we were all very clear that there is a certain path to be taken.
Yeah,
So if you want to do marketing, you like, and I'm talking FMCG companies, you said you will go into sales, you'll do a couple of sales stints in different kinds of markets, then it's a big deal to move up into marketing, then you work your way through brand manager, marketing manager, and so on,
yeah,
and then that's how the career progressed. And it took, you were very clear, it took a certain period of time to get to somewhere. I think today, if I were to fast forward to today, and if I when I interact with some of the youngsters, I think that philosophy has changed, right?
mm,
For them, it's no longer about I'm going to really invest long term, build a career in a
mm,
certain way. I think a lot more people are looking at it a little bit more as gigs. And
yeah,
I mean, I might be generalizing here, but maybe that's not fully there yet. But I think that's the direction in which moving. It's like almost as if employees volunteer their time for the organization
yeah,
only if it is worth their while. If they figure out that the organization is not able to give them something, they're
mm,
very happy to chuck it and move on, right?
yeah,
So I think that thing is coming a lot more. So the strong connect with the organization, that I want to work with the same organization and build a career for myself, I think that's changing, right? So I
yeah,
think these are two things to be kept in mind. And in that context, if I look at it, I don't think there is anything called a perfect job.
mm,
And I know sometimes I do a lot of mentoring work for youngsters, and we
mm,
talk about it. So the way I always articulate it is, it's like my job is a function of X1, X2, X3, X4. So there are, say, 7 things
mm,
which it is a function of, right? So for example, the role, the company and the culture,
mm,
the manager, the team, and the freedom you get to work, and of course the money, right? So there
yeah,
are a multiple set of variables, and the satisfaction with the job is always a function of that. And
yeah,
you will never have everything clicking at the top level. So
mm,
you need to make a choice and saying, in the final
yeah.
analysis, how does that equation stack up? And if, for example, out of 7 things, 5 things work for me, and maybe one or two things is not exactly the way I would like it to be,
With you on
that's a
that.
good place to be in. So I think it's a little bit of that, I would say.
Yeah, with you on that. In fact, the other day I was talking to my niece and she said, Chachu, what should I do in my career? And I was expecting X percentage marks and I've got X minus 2%. She was a little concerned. And, while reflecting on my own career and by reflecting on the careers of people that I look up to, for that matter, you, I think what really matters, it's not only the one decision, it's the body of the work that you have with you that
Yeah,
makes you where you are.
absolutely.
And also another shift that I've observed, if you look at a generation prior to the current generation, for them they would have a job and then they would volunteer somewhere to fulfill their passion.
Yeah,
On the contrary, today people are looking for something that they really care for.
exactly.
As you use the word gigs, they might be very comfortable working for an organization for 1.5 years, and then after 1.5 years they
Yeah,
might switch the industry, forget about the job, forget
yeah,
about the organization. They will switch the industry altogether. So, Rajesh, in your career, you have worked with Racket Benkaiser, you have worked with Cherry Blossom, you have worked with Marico, you have worked with PepsiCo, you have worked with Hindustan Times, you have worked with Apollo, and now you are heading Perfetti. Now, if you look at the complete career, what has been a common denominator that has worked for you? And
yeah,
one of those challenges that you have not been able to decode for yourself?
yeah. So I think common denominator I would say is two things. One, the challenge that the role offers, right? I
Hmm.
think that's definitely number one for me in terms of how challenging is the role, and also subsumed in it is how much of a learning does it offer? Because I strongly believe that if you're not learning, then you don't grow, and I don't mean grow as in a career, but just grow as a person, right? So
Individual.
as an individual. So I think that's an important aspect of it. And the second important aspect is, to me, is the culture and the people,
Hmm.
right? So what kind of a culture is that organization have, and what kind of people do I work with? Because again, you spend anything between 8 to 10 hours at work, at least physically. So therefore, the kind of people you work with, the kind of engagement you have, and what you learn from each other, I think that's important as well. So I would say these are two critical things, and those have stood me in good stead through my career.
Okay. And what is that one challenge that you have not been able to decode for yourself? Any internal challenge, any external challenge?
Yeah, I think if I would look at challenge one, I have moved to very different kinds of roles as well,
Hmm.
and each time I move to a different role, there is always that initial question in my mind as to will I be able to do justice to the job, to the level of expectation of the stakeholders,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's always a concern, in the sense when you move from a sales job to a marketing job, or when you move from a marketing brand manager job to a cat head job, or when I moved from, for example, Pepsi to Hindustan Times, completely different industry. So initially there is always that thing that will I be able to do justice to it in
Hmm.
terms of doing what is expected from me in that role. I think that would be definitely one thing. And then of course you realize that as you get into it, you're able to do it, and then you move to the next one. But
Yeah.
that is there. Yeah.
And that still stays with you.
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
even when I moved, I mean, I joined Perfetti 6 years ago in Bangladesh as the general manager. And after when I joined that role, I had no idea, I mean, what a general manager does from close quarters. Of course, I've
Hmm.
observed different general managers.
Hmm.
So it did take me a lot of time. I did not have a predecessor, for example.
Hmm.
That person had left, and my boss was also not there, just for about 6 months. So
Hmm.
literally, you were like thrown into the deep end. And I think what happens is, so my first task was to make a list of who are the 4 or 5 MDs that I worked with, and I called each one of them and had a talk with them to say what are the things that I should be looking at. And
Hmm.
I also made another note, what are the things that I should not be doing,
Hmm.
right? Just as it's important to say what you should do, it's also important to say what you should not do.
Hmm.
And I used to use that sort of in front of me as a Bible, and then make sure that I started working on it.
Hmm.
And then, of course, fortunately for me, I mean, it was an extremely successful stint there.
Yeah.
And then I came into a newly created role in India, which a role which didn't exist in the company ever. I mean, it
Hmm.
was a chief transformation officer role.
Hmm.
Perfetti in its history has never had that role, and I'm not talking about India, globally as well.
Globally. Yeah.
So I had no idea what that role. I don't think anybody had too much of an idea what it was about. But to me, again, it seemed like a very interesting and challenging role to take up. And after I took up, I crafted my own job description as to what that role is about. But again, it was probably I did that role eventually for about 10 months. Fantastic
Hmm.
role from a learning perspective. And then I moved to the current role, which is the India GM role.
Yeah.
Again, when I was sitting in Bangladesh and looking at India, I used to think to myself, I would love to sit in that chair one day, but I have no clue whether I would be able to do justice to that role. And
Hmm.
it's been about 2 years now since I took on that role. But again, it's been a great ride, and touch wood, some very good things have happened as well.
And the
So the
organization is
initial
growing.
thing is always there.
So that what you're saying is, what I'm listening is that there's a humming noise inside you always that's saying, "Hey Rajesh, will you be able to do justice to that?" And isn't it interesting, Rajesh, that the moment you come across youngsters when they get their first job, they often tell me that, "Hey Gaurav, I have this humming voice inside me, and it often questions me that will you be able to do justice to this role?" And today I have somebody who's heading Perfetti in India, who's handling the complete P&L, and still the voice continues to walk. Isn't this really
Yeah,
interesting?
it is, and I think it's true at many instances, right? It's like, when you're making a big presentation, you have a little bit of that, positive, this thing in you,
Tension.
tension in you,
Yeah.
and it's good because it keeps you really mentally alert and stuff. And
Hmm.
no matter how many times you do that with the board or with anybody, that is always there, even when you go in for that for the 15th time. So I
Yeah.
think some of these things do stay with you over the years, and I really think those are good things to have because they
Yeah.
then keep you on your toes and they keep you focused as well.
Yeah. 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 In fact, my teacher, Marilyn, often talks about having a wise critic within you
Yeah,
that will continue to help you to stay on the path of growth, stay on course, and give your best,
absolutely.
right? So, Rajesh, you are a photographer, you are a writer, you are a traveler, you go for adventure trips regularly on annual basis, right? You are a fitness freak. So, if you look at Rajesh as a third person, what do you think? What is Rajesh seeking for?
I mean, I wish I knew what I was seeking for. I think
Hmm.
that's still work in progress. But for example, I wrote out my personal mission statement about 5 6 years ago,
Yeah.
and some of it's still, I think, a work in progress document. But some of the things that I spoke about in that, or wrote for myself in that, is learning is an important aspect in my life.
Hmm.
Growth is important. Inspiring people around me is important.
Hmm.
Seeking new experiences is important. And I think if I try to connect the dots for all of these, it's probably in the space of, I mean, we have one life that we lead. How can I make myself lead a holistic life where I'm also, broadening my perspective, imbibing new things, and in general being able to also contribute back to the people around me and the community at large. So
Hmm.
those are a few factors which are, how shall I say, govern my life.
Hmm.
And I think photography, while when I got into photography 15 years ago, maybe it was not that thought through in the way I'm explaining it right now. But photography is something that I've been dabbling with for a long time, and I got an opportunity in Bombay to get a little bit more serious into it.
Yeah.
And when I started doing it, I realized that it gave me a huge level of satisfaction and happiness. And then I continued with it. And I think some of these passions, what I realize is a lot of stuff happens in our day-to-day life which sucks out of an energy and creates negative energy.
Hmm.
And these passion pursuits that we have really help in replenishing the energy and bringing about energy equilibrium. So whether it
Hmm.
is photography for me on a regular basis, yoga on a daily basis, or my adventure trips on an annual basis, I think all of these help in the recharging and the replenishing of the energy at one level. And of course, the every time you step out, you meet very interesting people who are totally
Hmm.
different from you, come from various parts of the world, and the kind of conversations, the interactions that you have add
Hmm.
so much value to me.
It does. It does. And I think now where you are in your photography, for that matter, let's begin from there. You're not only somebody who's only in photography for your hobby, for your interest. I mean, today you are one of the celebrated and accomplished photographer that is considered in the country, right? In fact, I remember the calendar of 2010, the A to Z of emotions, or in 2011, again, you published another calendar that talks about bring out the child in you, or for that matter, the 2013 publication that you had about sun signs, right? Now, those were sold to raise money for NGOs. Now, if you can just share with us, how was your experience of starting from scratch, starting from being just a photographer for the sake of hobby or interest, and then making it to an extent where you could raise money for NGO? And in between, last time we spoke about that you had to travel to Mumbai on weekly basis, right? You will click the photographs of the celebrities and then you'll come back. How was your experience? What were your learnings from those three publications that you had?
Sure. I think first of all, I must correct you, Gaurav. You said celebrated photographer in the country. I'm by no means anywhere close to that. But yeah,
That's being humble,
no,
Rajesh.
no, no, no. That's
So
being
please go ahead. Let's not get there.
just being realistic. No, but I think photography. Like I said, I picked it up about 15 years ago, And once I started doing it, and doing something for the community again has been something close to my heart as well. And then I just said, is there a way to sort of combine these two and get it to something even bigger? And that's how it started. I started speaking to a friend of mine who's also in an advertising agency.
Hmm.
One thing led to the other, and we said way back in 2010, it's been 10 years now, let's try and put together a calendar
Hmm.
which we can then create, which also helps us to showcase our creativity, but also helps we can maybe sell it and raise some money and give it to some charity. So that's how
Hmm.
the whole thought came up. And then of course one thing led to the other, and I had a day job. I was working at PepsiCo at that time. So every Saturday and Sunday, every other Saturday and Sunday, I used to go to Bombay. I used to try and leverage my network, find some ways of getting in touch with some celebrity or the other. And long story short, a couple of shoots every other weekend, and slowly one thing led to the other, and we managed to actually get a very very good mix of celebrities. And the first concept we worked around was A to Z of emotions, which meant that that calendar had 26 pictures. And what we also did, which then stayed with me as a format for my all 7 calendars, was the date pad and the picture were independent of each other. So if I liked a particular person, I could keep that always, irrespective of the month of the year. So yeah, so that came out really well, and we raised about 3.5 lakh rupees with the first calendar, and then that gave us confidence that yeah, I can do the next one, and so on and so forth. And I managed to actually do that for 7 years out of the last 10 years. Um, yeah, and each experience, of course, in Mumbai was very very fascinating, and that can take a pretty long time for me to go through the whole thing. But you realize also that most celebs are also human beings at the end of the day. They are happy to contribute for a cause, and they are happy to give you their time for it. So in the process, I also met some really interesting people, and actually also made a little bit of friends with a few of them. I think people like Gulpanag, Juhi Chawla, Shraddha Kapoor were all really nice people to shoot and work with. And each of those experiences taught me something new as well.
Also, you were at the helm of your career, and then you decided to take a sabbatical and went for a backpack. What was that moment, and what was going on in your mind when you decided to make this choice, Rajesh?
Yeah. So this happened actually 2011, 12, around that time. Basically, I mean, I was working for Apollo Tires at that time, and then it so happened that it's a very cyclical industry,
Yeah.
the rubber industry, and at a certain point of time, we found that what the big plans that the company had were not happening in that period of time, and in a way, I was not enjoying what I was doing. And to me, a philosophy in my life, at least, is that I should do what I enjoy, and I should enjoy what I do. I think it
Hmm.
needs to work both ways. And that was not happening. And I said, rather than just go and sit in office and pretend to do something, of course, it was a little bit of a shock, in the sense that I thought I was getting into a great opportunity, great role, etc. That wasn't happening. But I said, let me use that time productively. So my wife was kind enough to say that she would continue to take care of the expenses at the house.
Hmm.
And that's when I decided, let me take a sabbatical. I've been working for about 15, 16 years up to then. Take a break and do those things that I've always been wanting to do.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's how I took a break, and I decided to sort of backpack across the country. I took my camera
Yeah.
and I went to places like Banaras to shoot, Dev Deepavali there, or Calcutta. I spent a week in a guest house there shooting the Pujo celebrations. Went to Pushkar, and then we went
Hmm.
to on a holiday to Italy. So I did a lot of those stuff,
Hmm.
met people for coffee and lunches and stuff. So really, did all those things that I wanted to do, which you
Hmm.
don't get to do when when you have a full time job. And then
Yeah.
yeah, the sabbatical lasted for about 6 months, and then I got another opportunity, and then I moved back to corporate life. That was with the Hindustan Times, because my earlier boss from Reckitt
Hmm.
was working in Hindustan Times. He called me up and said, "Look, I have a role for you. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Okay."
Brilliant.
I had my sabbatical, and then I got back to work.
Yeah. So what I'm listening right now, Rajesh, is a couple of things, right? One is that not all your choices would put you on the course that you would like to be. So it's okay that in case you think that you have made a wrong choice, it's okay to take a step back.
Yeah.
A fair assumption. And the second thing, what I'm listening is right now, I think the kind of relationship that you could build with your boss, that he was kind enough to invite you again, current role. So that means the hard work that you have invested in is never going to fail you for that matter. It will
Yeah.
always help you move to the next level.
No, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. And the third thing is make sure you've got good relationship with your wife. You never know when she's going to help you again.
When you need it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That goes without saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rajesh, help me understand. I'm sure in all these ups and the downs, in all those accomplishments and all those so-called not the best choices, I'm sure you would have come across some dark phase of your life where you would have actually experienced your lowest self. So if you can just share one of those experience and how did you manage to get out of that?
Yeah, even the example I was just giving now, when the role in Apollo wasn't the way I thought it would be, and it was not taking me anywhere, was one such thing. Because before that, I'd worked for PepsiCo for 6 years, and I mean, it was a fantastic company to work for, and I had a great run there. And I had given up that and moved to something which I thought was going to be even better, and it wasn't the case. So that was definitely one of the, I would say, dark phases. But one of the things I've picked up over the years is also the fact that there are certain things that you can control, and there are certain things which are not in your control. And the more we are able to focus in our circle of influence, the better we are, because the circle of concern is something that you can't do anything about, right? So yes, it is natural to feel disappointed, yeah, but then you realize that those are circumstances which are not in your control, right? The rubber market is what it is. The company therefore couldn't afford to do those big plans that they wanted to do. You focus on what is within your influence, right? And that's when I said, yeah, rather than sit and mope about it, it's a blessing in disguise, because then I can take a break, do those things that I wanted to. And I was quite confident that with my experience and with my pedigree, I would be able to find another job and get back to work at some point of time.
Any 6 months patch or a year long patch in your life does not define much. As I often share, it's the body of the work that's
Yeah,
going to define where you're going to settle. And for that matter, where is the need to get settled? What
exactly.
I've learned from you, Rajesh, is like keep walking. You might not be able to run, you might not be able to jog, but at least start crawling. Start moving inch by inch in the direction that you would want to move
Absolutely.
into. So great, Rajesh. Thank you so much for the first phase of the conversation. Now I'm going to invite you in the rapid question answer round. And my request to you is without thinking much, you have to come up with one word or at the max one sentence, right?
Okay.
In just one go. You don't have to think much. So here we go. Are we game for that? Here, the first question, Rajesh. Your childhood toy that you miss the most.
My badminton and table tennis racket.
Okay. If not a marketing professional, what else would you have done?
Photography.
What do you love to cook?
Desi khana. I don't cook much, but when I do, desi khana.
Fantastic. And your favorite holiday destination?
Anywhere in the mountains.
Your biggest fear?
I have many, but biggest heights and water.
Okay. And this is only between you and me, right? Your first crush.
My classmate in grade 8, maybe 8 or 9.
And by any chance, did I tell you even Nirupama is on the line right now?
No, but she knows
Ah,
about it.
one habit you wish you could change in yourself.
I tend to get impatient rather quickly.
Okay. A life transforming quote for you.
Quote.
Yeah.
This is a Confucius quote. You have only two lives, and uh, the second one starts when you realize you have only one.
So beautiful. I think I know the answer to the next question. And then also I'm going to ask you, what would you prefer, mountains or beach?
Mountains.
A business leader you admire the most?
Two, I would say. One is Harsh Mariwala, who's the
Mhm,
chairman of Marico, and
mhm.
the other would be Indra Nooyi, who was the chairman and president of
PepsiCo.
PepsiCo.
Super. Thank you so much. I've heard about both Mr. Mariwala a lot from all the people who have worked with Medico, in fact. And of course, who doesn't know Indra Noiji? So thank you so much, Rajesh, for bringing your true self in this last quick rapid question answer round. I know it at times it could be really suffocating. You may or may not want to share that with everyone, but that's how life is. At times it could be unfair. So thank you so much for dealing with that portion as well so beautifully. So shall we move to the next phase of our conversation, Rajesh?
Sure.
Okay. So Rajesh, despite such hectic schedule, how do you ensure that you get to spend time with your family, keep your passion alive, live your purpose on day-to-day basis? I've heard a lot about you and the way you've been able to balance your life from Nirupama as well. So how do you do all this so beautifully and with such a beautiful aplomb?
So again, I think it's evolved over the years, and when like I said, I was writing my mission statement as well. And one of the things I realized is when you are writing it, and I really believe that's true for not just business strategy but true for life as well. It's important to put down what is of priority for you, but equally it's important to put down what is not of priority to you, right? And
Hmm.
I think if you are able to, because the minute you try and do everything, then you get sucked in different directions and you end up doing nothing. So I think I was blessed to be able to make that distinction and try and say, okay, these are things that really matter to me, and these don't matter to me beyond a point. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, for example, if it came to a trade-off of going for a party on a Saturday night versus having to sleep early because I had to get up for a 4 o'clock in the morning shoot, I was clear that this shoot mattered to me, and therefore that's what I would prioritize, right?
Hmm.
So, or I used to be like any other Indian adult male, a big cricket buff, but then I realized that okay, watching that match for 8 hours or 4 hours was not a great way of productively spending your time. I'd
Hmm.
rather use that time more productively somewhere else. Of course, I still watch the odd big match which happens, but that's not anything which I'm obsessed with anymore, right?
Hmm.
So I think one part is about prioritizing, I think, which is very important.
In that also, what is important to me and what is not important to me?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Clearly defining
not
that.
important, you let that be,
Hmm.
right? I think that's critical. And the second part is, when people ask me, I tell them that it's about making time. Where do you find time? I don't think
Hmm.
you'll ever find time. And that making time actually comes from the prioritization also. So if you're able to prioritize, then you are able to make time for what is important.
Hmm.
And for me, the other thing that also works is, which has been good for me, is I very seamlessly I'm able to toggle between work and non-work.
Hmm.
So on a work day, I might take out 1 hour to do something which is not necessarily to do with work. But today afternoon on a Saturday, I might sit and clear up some mails which I need to clear because there is a bit of a backlog. So I'm able to very seamlessly do that toggle, and actually that works well for me.
Beautiful. And also, Rajesh, you started this NGO called My Daughter is Precious. And that's an initiative where your complete family is involved in.
Yeah,
Tell me more about that. How did this idea come to you?
yeah.
And why did you decide to start this initiative? My daughter is precious.
So yeah, we have a daughter to start with. So she's Kavya, and she's now going to be 19 in a few weeks. So when we were living in Bangladesh, she used to go to the American school there, and I think it was 2016 or 2015, sorry, yeah, 2015, when she came back from school one day and said, she saw a documentary called Girl Rising, which said that there are about 65 million girls in the world who don't have the privilege of access to good education.
Hmm.
And she wanted to do something about it. And then, we got talking over dinner table, and one thing led to the other. And we had also read about this British lady who actually used to go to underprivileged areas in India to take pictures, and she was very disappointed that she couldn't give the pictures to the people who she shot, and therefore she switched to a Polaroid camera to take pictures so that she could give away those photos as well. So then we sort of combined 2 3 things, and then we said, why don't we put photography, which is our passion, to good use by so what we started doing was we started going to these underprivileged areas in Dhaka. We used
Hmm.
to take our house help lady along with us for the language and the translation, and we used to meet fathers along with their daughters, tell them how precious their daughter is and how
Hmm.
important it is to give her a good education and to treat her the same way they treat their son. And we used to then take a Polaroid picture of the father and daughter and give it to them as a cherished memento of their relationship.
Hmm.
And that's how we started doing this. And then we used to do a story around the daughter saying her name is so and so, she enjoys doing this, she would like to grow up and become a teacher, and so on. And those stories we used to publish on our Facebook page called My Daughter is Precious.
Hmm.
And slowly it started getting traction. And then we said, this is a very nice thing to do, but it would be good if you could also make a monetary, contribution and make a tangible impact in their lives.
Hmm.
And that's how we started supporting some girls in high school.
Hmm.
And when we moved back to India, we realized that the problem actually happens when the girl is about 15, 16, 17 years old, when the father says, she's anyway going to get married soon, why should I invest in her education? Or
Hmm.
she's asked to do domestic help in the house, and so on and so forth. Or there is a cost attached to the education. So that's when what we decided was, let's pick deserving girls at that age and make sure we see them through graduation, so that at the end of those 3 years of graduation, they are able to get a job and become economically independent.
Hmm.
So currently, we support about 23 girls,
Wow.
largely drawn from the Janki Devi Memorial College in Delhi.
Hmm.
And the way it works is, Kavya runs it. She's the founder of the organization. She does the work in terms of coordinating everything. Nirupama, my wife, she's a leadership trainer and a coach as well. So she does the mentoring. So she has a cohort of women who help in mentoring, because these girls need advice on, what course to take, etiquette, communication, and so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
these ladies volunteer their time for that, and
Hmm.
I take care of some of the admin work behind it. And we have tied up with an NGO called Shiksha Dan. What happens is, we try and raise money through friends and family. The money goes into a corpus, and as and when the fees need to be paid for these girls, we request Shiksha Dan. They directly pay the fees, and they supply us with the receipt and so on. And then
Hmm.
we give periodic updates to all those who contributed to this. So that's how
Right.
it is running. So today we have, like I said, about 23 girls we support.
Beautiful. And Rajesh, I'm just curious. They say the family that dine together, they stay together. And in your case, if you look at the complete family is involved into a cause that you really care for.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, in this initiative of in this act of serving others together, how is that helped your daughter to become a compassionate and a responsible citizen? How is that shaping her character?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Gaurav. And I am so happy to see the progress in that space.
Hmm.
First of all, I must also say that a lot of kids these days are, they feel drawn towards some cause or the other. So that's great news for the world. I
Hmm.
think far more than what we were when we were kids. I mean, we didn't care. I shouldn't generalize. At least I can speak for myself. But I think nowadays you find a lot more of them being, very drawn to such things. So
Hmm.
same thing with Kavya. I mean, when she came with, when we all went for these, photo shoots to these underprivileged areas, we did it in Dhaka, we did it in Calcutta, Chennai, Delhi, and you see that in a tiny room, which is literally 6 feet by 6 feet, there are five people staying there, and very often in tough circumstances. I think it just opened up to them and to her that there is a real world that lies outside, which is very different from the protected bubble that she was growing up in. And I think that made her far more appreciative of many material
Hmm.
things in life. So today it's almost like she doesn't, she would really think about it, whether she needs that extra pair of clothes, or wants to go out and dine and stuff like that, which I think is fantastic, right? So I
Yeah.
think it instills in them also a strong sense of grounding, and
Yeah.
also an appreciation for actually what they have.
Yeah. So it's like sticking to your basic values. Rajesh, now if you reflect in your life and look at the kind of journey that you have covered, you are considered one of the most successful executives and leaders in the corporate arena today. So if you look at that one, what is that one piece of advice that has had the maximum impact on you as an individual, as a professional, as an executive?
Well, yeah, there have been many, but one thing I can think of, I did this leadership program way back. This was in 2005, maybe, so 15 years back, but
Hmm.
it's still stuck in my head as a thing, and I definitely practice it, and I share that with many other people as well. Is when it comes to leadership, they say that a good leader is one who's able to inspire confidence of his team in himself or herself, right? A great leader is one who's able to inspire the confidence of the team in themselves. So the team can operate at a higher order level even without that person being there. So
Yeah.
to me, that's a distinction between a good leader and a great leader.
And a great leader.
And that's something that has stuck with me over the years.
Brilliant thought. And I'm sure that's a good piece of advice to all the youngsters or all the emerging leaders or emerging managers that we have in today's corporate. So, Rajesh, let's assume that life is a fairy tale. Let's assume that. So, which one episode in your life gave you that impression that you are her favorite character?
I would say, when I moved into this role of transformation officer, I had, like I said, I had no idea what that role was about. I don't think anybody had an idea. Number two, they told me, okay, you do this role for 2 years and then we'll figure out what happens. So it was a big leap of faith that I took. And of course, it was great learning while I did it. And then as it turned out, I did that role for about 10 months. And then I was told that I'm going to get elevated as the role that I'm currently doing. So to me, that was almost too good to be true and very fairy tale-ish in that sense.
And now, let's say if you were to give a piece of advice to your own 21-year-old self, what would that be?
It would be two things. One, I would say get out of comfort zone as much as possible. So I think that would be one. And the second would be, there is a circle of concern, there is a circle of influence. Try and operate as much in the circle of influence as possible. And that then starts becoming bigger and your circle of concern starts becoming smaller.
Yeah. Absolutely, yes. There's only that much that you can take care of. And so there's no fun in mulling over things that you don't have any control on. Because
Exactly.
at the end of the day, it's only going to give you more stress. It's only going to consume your mental bandwidth and psychological bandwidth. And it's going to keep you in a space that you'll not be very comfortable with.
Absolutely.
So absolutely, yes, Rajesh. So what do you know for sure with 100% certainty and surety in your life today?
I guess what I know with 100% certainty is that things will not be the way they are right now. Things will keep changing.
So thank you so much, Rajesh. I think I had an amazing conversation with you. It's always such a pleasure to get into a conversation with you and pick up my own learning nuggets for that.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Gaurav, for having me on this. It was really nice talking to you and some very nice questions as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. And please convey my regards to Nirupama and Kavya.
Will do.
And
Thank you very much.
look forward to meet you soon again. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care. Thank you.